Night does not fall over Rome. It settles, like a judgment. A slow hush drapes itself across the 7 hills, thick as velvet, heavy with waiting. The last colors of the sky bleed into ash, leaving only the cold shimmer of stars. And on the Palatine Hill, where the gods once whispered to stone, a solitary augur lifts his eyes to the heavens. His breath is visible, curling like prayer in the winter air. He does not speak. He listens. For omens. For tremors in the sky. For birds that do not fly in vain. The scent of burning laurel clings to his robes, smoke and resin woven deep into the folds of wool. Bronze bowls crackle with sacred flame, their embers spitting sparks toward the dark. Below him, the Tiber coils like a serpent beneath moonlight, silver-scaled and slow, whispering to the reeds as it passes, names, long buried, truths, long feared. In this silence, this sacred Roman silence, the city remembers her first breath. Not a breath taken, but one stolen. Not a beginning in gold, but in hunger. Not in the hands of gods, but of wolves. Beneath the fig tree, where roots clawed at the river's edge and night birds nested in crooked branches, the she-wolf came. Her eyes were yellow with wilderness, her sides gaunt from the famine of winter. She did not question why the 2 infants lay there, naked, cold, mouths open like fledglings. She only knew they were alive. And that she would not let them die. Her tongue was rough, her milk thin, but it was life. Her fur was matted with river silt and the stench of animal rot, yet the boys clung to her warmth as though it were the last fire on earth. Romulus and Remus, not yet princes, not yet enemies. Just mouths. Just limbs. Just the smallest echo of fate in their cries. No crown waited for them. No prophecy announced them. Only the wind through the sedge. The shifting mud. The flicker of stars, cold and distant. But above, far above, the sky listened. Lightning coiled behind clouds. Jupiter stirred upon his storm throne. In the shadows of Olympus, something ancient opened its eyes. This would not be a story of peace. It never could be. The twins grew under the tutelage of beasts and shepherds. They learned not Latin, but the dialect of survival, the crack of bone against rock, the snarl that meant danger, the silence that meant death. They hunted with slings and fed on roots. They watched the skies for vultures, not signs. And yet, they were watched in return. The gods were not absent. They were silent. As if waiting. The twins did not know they were born of a king's fear and a vestal's stolen body, that their mother, Rhea Silvia, had been forced into virgin vows only to be ravaged by a god in the dark. They did not know that Amulius, a false king, had ordered them thrown into the river like refuse. That only a leaking basket, and fate disguised as current, had saved them. But the earth remembers. The reeds remember. And so does the she-wolf, whose howl now echoes in every Roman wall. Romulus stands taller than his brother. He dreams of stones, of carving lines into the dirt, of raising palisades from mud and blood. Remus laughs at him. He is wilder, faster. His heart still beats to the rhythm of the forest. Yet destiny does not belong to the wild. It belongs to those who draw lines. They argue beside the Tiber. One draws a circle with a staff. The other steps across it, smirking. And in that moment, one heartbeat, one breath, everything shifts. Romulus strikes. Remus falls. The river watches. The fig tree stands silent. The she-wolf does not return. Romulus stands alone, the blood on his hands warm and terrifying. He looks up. Not at his brother. Not at the ground. But at the sky. At the silence. At the gods who said nothing. He names the place Roma. Not out of triumph. But grief. A grief that will ripple for centuries. From this first murder, a city will rise. A city that devours brothers. A city that builds on sacrifice. Her gates will open to fugitives, to slaves, to those with nowhere left to kneel. She will be a haven and a horror, raised not on love, but necessity. Not on law, but survival. Romulus will become her first king. And he will vanish not into death, but into myth. Some say he was torn apart by senators. Others say he ascended in a storm, taken by Mars himself. Neither matters. He is gone. And Rome remains. And now, deep in the night, the augur lowers his hands. His eyes are wet. The birds have flown east. The flames have gone still. The ritual is done. He turns away from the hill, his footsteps echoing on marble wet with dew. Behind him, the dawn begins, slow and pale, like the memory of fire. Rome wakes. And she remembers not peace, but blood. She was born of wolves. Raised by death. And crowned in silence. But the gods. The gods are only just beginning to speak. A lyre string snaps in the dark, a single note, sharp as bone against flint, reverberating through the quiet ruin of the forum. Beneath a sky veiled in the dust of fading stars, the marble columns rise like the spines of a forgotten beast, half standing, half swallowed by time. The temple of Vesta leans in shadows, its sacred fire now a cold memory beneath the cracked stone altar. Smoke once filled this place. Now, only the echo of steps that are no longer taken, prayers that are no longer whispered. But Rome remembers. Not in voice, but in the silence between things. Here, amid the ashes of empire, the gods once walked, not above, but among. Jupiter in thunder. Juno in vengeance. Mars in fury. They were not distant, not tender. They were reflections, raw and brutal, born of the human hunger to control the unseen. The air is heavy with old incense and the faint tang of rusted iron. A blackbird hops along a broken frieze, its feet touching the name of a god no longer spoken. Down in the Subura, the poor still mutter charms before childbirth. In the patrician ruins, cracked mosaics gleam with stories that no longer guide but haunt. This was a city that bargained with divinity. Rome did not kneel, it negotiated. She gave her gods temples, festivals, blood. In return, she asked for storms to cease, borders to hold, and names to endure. The gods of Rome were civic gods, legal deities. They were honored like senators, judged like generals. Contracts were drawn, offerings made with bureaucratic precision. Even the divine had terms and consequences. The Sibylline books, cryptic, oracular, trembling with centuries, were read only when terror bloomed, in famine, in plague, in war. Then, and only then, would the veil lift, and the Senate send for prophecy. And the gods would answer. With fire. With omen. With silence. There was never comfort in them, only recognition. The gods mirrored the state, powerful, unmerciful, glorious, and doomed. Imagine the rites of sacrifice, the ox robed in garlands, led with care to the altar. Its breath steaming in the early Roman dawn. Children watching with wide eyes, their fingers clutched around bread dipped in honey. A priest's blade gleams, and the animal falls. Not just for piety. For control. For fear. To remind both heaven and the gathered crowd, Rome holds the gods accountable. And in turn, the gods hold Rome. Even in leisure, they could not escape the divine. Mercury watched every contract. Venus leaned into every seduction. Mars bled into every field. And Diana, cold-eyed and silver-veiled, stood in the forests just beyond civilization's reach, the goddess of what could never be tamed. At night, across the rooftops of the Aventine, a child kneels beside a shrine tucked into an alley wall. His lips tremble on a name his mother taught him, Hercules, make me strong. He is too young to know the politics of religion. But he believes. In that small flicker of oil-lit warmth, he believes. In the baths of Caracalla, statues still gaze through the steam. Their marble arms, once kissed by the faithful, are now chipped by time, but the echo of reverence clings to them like sweat. Rome was not Christian. Not yet. She was a tapestry of foreign gods made Roman, foreign people made Roman, foreign fears made Roman. Isis came from Egypt, Mithras from Persia. They were adopted, adapted, woven into the threadbare cloak of the empire. And always, always, Jupiter above. His temples were thunder chambers. His priests wore robes heavy with gold thread and ash. His name was invoked at triumphs and executions alike. He was the sky and the judge of all beneath it. Yet even Jupiter aged. As the empire swelled beyond its own understanding, belief splintered. Not in rebellion, in weariness. The gods remained, but their voices grew thin. Their statues weathered. Their omens missed. The rituals repeated, but felt less. And so, the people turned elsewhere. Some to mystery cults, secret rites held in candlelit caves. Others to silence, choosing no gods at all. But most simply forgot. Until the child comes again. He returns to the alley shrine. But this time, the oil is gone. The statue, broken. His mother says it is forbidden now. There is a new god. A single one. Unseen. Undefeatable. He nods. But his fingers, almost without thinking, trace the edge of the broken stone where Hercules once smiled. The gods do not scream when they die. They do not burn. They fade. And wait. And wonder who will mourn them. Far across the city, in the shadow of the Capitoline Hill, a priestess stands barefoot on the temple steps. She is one of the last. Her white robes are threadbare. Her hands tremble with age. But her eyes hold every fire that was ever lit on Rome's behalf. She places a sprig of olive on the threshold and whispers the names one final time. Janus. Mars. Vesta. Juno. Saturn. Bellona. Fortuna. A breeze rises. The ashes stir. And then, she turns, and walks into the morning. Behind her, the temple doors, once guarded by flame and fate, remain open, exposed to the world, like wounds. And so begins the next chapter. Where the gods retreat into stone. Where statues become relics. Where faith changes hands. But something still lingers. In the sound of thunder. In the flicker of a dying candle. In the space between names. The gods are no longer worshipped. But they are not entirely gone. They live where memory still listens. Where Rome, though buried beneath time, continues to breathe. A blade glints in the candlelight. Not in battle. Not in triumph. But in a room full of silence, thick as velvet, where linen shrouds the windows and every breath is held like a secret. The blade rests in her hands, not yet bloodied, only waiting. Its weight is simple, ceremonial. But in the cold hush of this hour, it feels like the center of the world. Lucretia does not weep. Her mouth is dry. Her eyes are steady. She is not alone. But she has never felt more solitary. The flicker of the oil lamp stretches her shadow across the wall, long, thin, fractured by stone. Her husband stands to the left, white with shock. Her father does not speak. A soldier, strong and silent, grips the hilt of his sword but makes no move. They have come because she sent for them. They have come because she asked them to witness. And in her voice, there is no tremble. Only the stillness of ruin. Only the echo of something sacred, breaking. She tells them what happened. The words come out like ash. That she was taken. That he came in the night, cloaked in royal blood and cowardice. That she did not resist, not to preserve herself, but to preserve them. Her house. Her name. Her Rome. The silence that follows is vast. The men's jaws are clenched. The torches spit quietly. Outside, dogs bark somewhere in the dark. Then, she lifts the blade. And the room becomes a grave. Lucretia does not scream. She does not curse. She only guides the metal to her heart, and falls, not like a victim, but like a verdict. Her blood pools onto the tiled floor, slow and black in the lamplight. The scent of iron rises with the heat of her last breath. Her dress, once crimson with nobility, blooms darker still, a flower opening into death. Rome will never be the same. They bury her with herbs and oils. With veils and salt. With coins for passage and linen for peace. But it is not mourning they carry in their hearts, it is fire. For Lucretia, the gods do not come. Jupiter stays his hand. Juno turns her face. Even Vesta's flame seems dimmer. But in the stillness of that aftermath, something awakens. Not divine. Not eternal. But human. Brutus, once a fool in court, now stands before the gathered crowd with blood still staining his hem. He raises his hand not in salute, but in fury. His voice does not crack. It cuts. No more kings. The cry is taken up like thunder, from streets, from markets, from temples abandoned and altars grown cold. A republic is born not in policy, but in grief. Not in the scrolls of scholars, but in the final breath of a woman wronged. They drive the Tarquins out, kings descended from gods, now made mortal by shame. Their palaces are stripped. Their names, cursed. Their statues, thrown into the Tiber with weights bound to the necks. But revolution is never clean. And Lucretia's ghost walks among the alleys and aqueducts, not in sorrow, but in warning. Her death lingers in the folds of Rome's new garments. Every senator's robe is stitched with her silence. Every law passed is haunted by her scream that was not screamed. Even Mars, god of war, tilts his spear in her direction. He knows power when he sees it. The city begins to reshape. No longer ruled by a throne, but by oaths and memory. By the weight of consequence. The gods remain, but quieter now. Less certain. As if Rome herself has learned to speak without them. The people gather in the forum, where Lucretia's name is carved not in marble, but in rhythm, chanted under breath, scratched into wood, whispered during childbirth, remember her. Remember her. Remember her. But history is not kind to those who bleed too soon. Time erodes even sacred names. Years will pass. Temples will rise again. Men will chase crowns under other names. But always, behind the veil of power, there will be a woman kneeling, hands still, heart quiet, blade resting against her breast. Waiting to remind them. And still, life continues. The markets bustle. The children laugh in alleyways paved by revolution. The streets grow louder with stories of consuls, of laws, of liberty fought and bartered. But beneath it all, the city hums with a wound never closed. A wound shaped like a woman's final breath. In the temple of Vesta, a new priestess places a candle near the wall. She says nothing. She knows the flame is not only for the hearth. It is for those who should have been protected. It is for the forgotten queens who wore no crowns. The flame flickers. And above, in the shadowed arches of the Capitoline, a storm gathers. Distant. But moving closer. Not all betrayals come with swords. Some come robed in law. Some in glory. Some in gods. And as Rome looks forward, to new wars, to new heroes, to new myths, something follows just behind her. Something carrying the scent of blood and linen. Of fire and silence. Of names that should never have been erased. Lucretia is gone. But Rome is still watching. And somewhere in the distance, a wolf begins to howl. A single crow circles overhead, cutting the sky like a curse. Below, the ground is soaked, not from rain, but from the blood of a boy who dreamed he was a man. His sword lies beside him, still clean. His eyes, still open. The battlefield does not mourn. It drinks. It devours. It forgets. Wind moves across the moor like a slow breath, tugging at the banner that once meant hope. Now it drips red into the mud. They say the gods choose their champions. But the gods did not come today. They watched, perhaps, from behind smoke, from behind stone, but they did not reach down. No thunder split the heavens. No eagle came to bear the fallen skyward. Only silence. Heavy. Final. And in that silence, a new fear begins to take root. It is not the fear of death. That has already come. It is the fear of what remains. For the survivors walk among the dead now, not to count them, but to remember who they were. Sons. Brothers. Lovers. Betrayers. And in every face, something is missing. Not just life. But meaning. There is no glory in this war. Not anymore. The king's tent stands on the hill, untouched by ash, guarded by men who did not bleed today. Inside, his hands tremble as they hold a cup of wine too sweet for this hour. His crown sits beside him, heavy, useless, stained with wax from a candle long extinguished. He won. But he has lost more than he knows. Because somewhere in the valley, among the charred grass and broken helms, a rumor is spreading. A name. A whisper. A shadow with fire in its mouth. The outcast has returned. Not in armor. Not in triumph. But in vengeance. He rides alone, cloaked in furs dark as ravens, his eyes pale with memory. His hands, calloused not by sword, but by exile. By frost. By time spent in the forests beyond the reach of kings. He was once a brother. Once a knight. Once a name spoken with pride. Now, he is only a question. Why did he come back? To reclaim? To punish? To destroy? No one knows. But when he passes through the outer villages, doors shut without command. Mothers clutch their children not out of fear, but confusion. For the man who rides past them does not look like a villain. He looks like someone who died and returned with something terrible behind his eyes. At night, the wind shifts. It brings stories, of wolves moving in unnatural patterns. Of fires lit in forgotten shrines. Of old gods whose names were buried but not broken. Of oaths that were never truly undone. And the king dreams of a forest path he once chose not to take. A woman's voice calling to him from the other side. A pact left unanswered. A debt now due. The man in furs does not knock when he reaches the castle gate. He does not raise a banner. He does not demand parley. He waits. And the gate opens. Because deep down, every kingdom knows what it owes. Every throne is built on something buried. The courtiers whisper. The guard stands stiff. The queen watches from behind a lattice of iron and remembers the name she once wrote in a diary and burned. He walks through the hall like a ghost reclaiming his bones. There is no challenge. No accusation. Only presence. And when he kneels before the throne, it is not submission. It is memory. The king speaks first. His voice breaks once. Then twice. My brother, but the word feels foreign now. Like honey poured over ashes. They speak of old things. Of a duel never fought. Of a father's will, twisted. Of a kingdom taken with blessings wrapped in lies. The man in furs does not raise his voice. But every sentence cuts. I did not come for the crown. I came for the truth. And suddenly, the hall feels colder. The fire dims. The tapestries whisper. Because truth is more dangerous than power. Truth changes things. It makes queens weep at night when no one watches. It makes knights question what they swore to. It makes peasants look up from their toil and remember the price of obedience. And truth, when spoken aloud, does not go back to sleep. That night, the man is offered a room within the keep. He does not take it. He sleeps outside, beneath the stars, as he has for years. The stone beneath him remembers his name. The wind above him sings it in a tongue the courtiers have forgotten. A page boy finds him before dawn, holding a letter sealed in wax, hands shaking. The queen has written to him. It is not love. It is not apology. It is fear. Because she, too, remembers the pact. The gods once smiled on this family. Now they wait. For retribution. For sacrifice. For balance. The king calls a council. They argue about policy. About land. About gold. But every sentence circles the same unspoken question: what if he takes it? Not the throne. But the people. What if they follow him? What if, beneath his silence, there is a flame? He does not attend the council. He walks the old roads. The ones that led nowhere, once. But now seem to lead everywhere. Villagers begin to appear at dawn, not with offerings, but with stories. Of how their sons died in wars they never understood. Of how the river no longer listens to prayers. Of how the gods have turned their faces from the city of stone. And he listens. Not as a king. Not as a priest. But as one who knows what it means to lose everything. By the seventh day, fires begin to burn in places they should not. Torches on hills once sacred. Lanterns near wells said to be cursed. Symbols painted in ash on the doors of houses where mothers still sing to gods older than the church. The king watches from his tower. And for the first time in years, he feels something move beneath his feet, not an earthquake. But history. Because the man in furs has not raised an army. He has raised a memory. A hunger. A reckoning. And that is harder to kill than any sword. In the crypts beneath the castle, where the bones of kings rest and the air smells of salt and silence, the queen kneels. She lights a single candle and whispers a name no one should speak. Not his name. The other name. The one carved into the stones beneath her bedchamber. The one the priests forbade. Because when oaths are broken, the old gods listen. And when justice fails, something else arrives. In the woods beyond the walls, wolves gather. But they do not howl. They wait. As he does. The man who came back with nothing, not crown, not army, not blessing, but with the one thing kingdoms fear most, a story. And when morning comes, the sky will burn soft gold. The bells will not ring. The people will not kneel. But somewhere, in a grove where ash trees twist and the moss remembers, a voice will rise. Not in rebellion. But in remembrance. And that voice will not be alone. A bell tolls, once, low and distant, as if the earth itself groaned in remembrance. Not the iron bell of the church. Not the polished chime of the king's chapel. This one is older. Deeper. Rusted and buried halfway in ivy. Hung from a broken yew where no road leads. It tolls only when the old blood is stirred. And tonight, it tolls for him. The man with no crown, yet more followers than any king. The man who did not march, but walked. Who did not shout, but listened. And in his silence, a nation began to remember what it had buried. They follow him now. Not with banners, but with bare feet. Not with drums, but with prayers. Peasants, smiths, widows, thieves, the forgotten, all drawn like ash toward fire. They do not ask for a throne. They ask for meaning. For too long, they have starved beneath banners that feasted. They have prayed to gods who stopped listening. They have been ruled by names instead of truths. And so, they walk into forests where the old laws still breathe in the moss. Through fields where bones grow like roots. Toward something they can feel, but not yet name. Behind them, the cities smolder, not in flames, but in fear. In the king's great hall, candles flicker like nervous eyes. Advisors argue in circles, sharpening words into weapons. What does he want? Why doesn't he speak? Why won't the people listen to us? But they are asking the wrong questions. The right one is this: what have we done that made them forget how to love us? The queen stands alone at the window. She watches the horizon where torches move like fireflies in a rising storm. She knows what comes next. Because she, too, was raised on stories older than scripture. And in those stories, justice never wore a crown. It wore scars. And it always came on foot. The outcast says nothing. Still. But those who walk beside him feel it, a pull, a pressure, a remembering. In one village, he stops before a shrine toppled by the bishop's men decades ago. A child places a wildflower at its base. No one speaks. But by dusk, the shrine is standing again. Stones carried by hands that once feared to be seen. In another, an old woman weeps when he passes. Not from grief. From recognition. "You are your mother's son," she says, barely more than a whisper. He does not answer. But he bows his head. Because he remembers her, too, from a time when winter meant story time, not starvation. Before betrayal. Before the crown broke his house in half. News spreads faster than parchment. They say wells once dry now run again. They say wolves follow him but do not bite. They say the old gods have begun to wake. The king orders riders sent with scrolls sealed in gold. Promises of grain. Of land. Of peace. But grain does not feed the soul. Land means nothing if it is soaked in sorrow. And peace, offered too late, is only silence after the scream. So the riders return with empty saddles, and the wind brings only more names. The names of those who have joined the walk. It is not an army. It is a remembering. And with every step, the outcast sheds a piece of the man he was told to be. No longer a knight. No longer a prince. Not even a rebel. Something older. At night, he stands before fires built in sacred spirals. He listens to the chants of voices that were once afraid to speak their mother tongue. He watches as the children paint symbols on the backs of their hands. He sees how the stars seem to bend toward the earth, as if listening. In a cave near the ruins of an abbey burned during the last purge, he kneels. Before a stone etched with the name of the sister he lost. The sister who would not kneel to the king's god. The sister whose screams still echo in his sleep. He lays a single feather on the stone. Then rises. The next day, the march turns south. Toward the river. Toward the crossing that once marked the line between old and new. The king's men wait there, 100 strong, armored in steel, faces hidden. The people do not stop. They walk with bare hands raised. The outcast steps forward. He says only one word. Enough. And for a moment, the world stills. Even the birds stop mid-flight. Even the trees seem to lean closer. One by one, the armored men lower their weapons. Not from fear. From memory. Because some of them, too, remember a different boy. A different king. A time before oaths were lies. The march crosses the river. And the wind changes. The city gates rise in panic. The king summons every priest, every knight, every ghost of power he can find. But power means nothing when the people no longer believe. Not in gold. Not in fear. Not in him. Inside the cathedral, the priests chant louder, desperate to drown out the sound of torches rising beyond the hills. But there is another sound now. Not music. Not war. A heartbeat. Ancient. Steady. Coming closer. In the chamber beneath the throne, where relics are kept and secrets rot, the queen unwraps the old cloth. Inside, a mask of wood and bone. Carved in a time before kings. The face of the god her ancestors once knelt to, in silence, in darkness, in truth. She holds it in her hands. And feels something move behind her ribs. Not fear. Not shame. Clarity. Outside, the outcast has reached the final hill. The city glows like an ember, beautiful, dying, about to become something else. He does not raise a sword. He does not shout. He kneels. And 1,000 kneel with him. Not to him. But to what he remembers. A world not ruled by crowns. But by covenant. Not by empire. But by earth. The bells begin to ring again. All of them. Even the ones no longer hung. Not by hands. By wind. And the sky turns gray, then gold, then blood. Not in omen. But in promise. Because something has shifted. Not a war. Not a revolution. A return. The king watches from his tower. He sees no swords. Only people. But it terrifies him more than any siege. Because he knows now, what power cannot protect him from. The truth. The memory. The fire without flame. And somewhere in the crowd, a girl holds up a piece of parchment. It has no words. Only a symbol. The same symbol etched into the mask the queen now holds. The same one burned into the door of the king's chapel. The same one he once ordered erased. But it is back now. Not in vengeance. In faith. And that faith does not need permission. That it began with silence. Not the kind born of peace, but the silence after thunder. The stillness when breath catches and the sky forgets how to move. The kind that hovers above a city holding its last secret. At dawn, the fog did not rise, it sank. Heavy and yellowed, as if the sun had curdled. It crept through the alleys, curled around chapel spires, and settled on rooftops like a warning. And in the courtyard of the old infirmary, where plague carts once groaned and priests burned incense against invisible death, a child knelt by a puddle. She traced circles in the water. Not for play. But for memory. Because the city had changed. Not suddenly, not loudly. But surely. The king's banners still hung, but limp. The priests still sang, but off-key. The guard still marched, but slower now. Because beneath the cobblestones and sermons and scrolls, something older was waking. Not a god. Not a man. A memory. The people had remembered their hunger. Now they remembered their power. In the town square, a woman hung bread from a broken spear. No charge. No tax. No priest to bless it. And yet, it fed more souls than any sermon. In the cathedral vault, someone had scrawled words across the stone walls. Not with ink. With soot. With ash. A language long banned, the tongue of grandmothers and forest healers. It said, "We are not your silence." And across the eastern gate, a banner flew, stitched by dozens of hands, blood still staining its edges. No crest. No gold. No lion. Just a single thread of black, winding like a river through white. The outcast symbol. Or perhaps not his. Perhaps everyone's. The king sat in his chamber, surrounded by velvet and fear. He no longer spoke. Only stared. At maps. At walls. At shadows. He had summoned his knights. They had not come. He had summoned his sons. But only one returned, and with his sword laid down. My oath, the boy whispered, was to justice. Not to a chair. The king said nothing. Because what answer is there, when the crown no longer means belief? Outside, the people did not riot. They rebuilt. Faster than any army could tear down. With hands. With stories. With tears. The old herbs returned to market, thyme for grief, yarrow for wounds. The bells rang not by decree, but by need. When a birth came. When a death passed. When the wind carried strange songs over the hills. The queen moved like a shadow through the cathedral halls. She did not kneel anymore. She lit candles where none had burned for decades. For the dead no one had named. For the living no one had seen. For the sisters and mothers and forgotten daughters whose prayers had been scrubbed from every book. And in her chamber, she wore the mask. Not fully. Just enough to feel it, the weight, the breath, the gaze. It smelled of soil and blood. Not war. Not rot. But birth. She understood now. What had once been buried was not dead. It had been waiting. By the riverbank, where the outcast had crossed only days before, people built a bridge of stones, no mortar, no engineer. Just hands. Each adding one. One weight. One truth. One proof that this was theirs again. No orders. No king. Just something older than both, trust. That night, a storm came. Not to punish. To cleanse. It tore flags from towers. It filled the gutters with ink and wine. It struck the cathedral spire, not down, but open. A gash in the roof through which moonlight spilled like spilled milk over stone saints. And through it all, the people sang. Not songs of battle. Songs of birth. Lullabies in forbidden tongues. Chants that once summoned the rain, now summoning something deeper. Hope. The priests tried to drown it. They rang bells until their arms bled. They burned herbs in the streets. They declared fasting, praying, kneeling. But no one knelt anymore. Because kneeling now meant forgetting. And they had remembered too much. One by one, the old houses opened their doors. Places that had once been shunned, homes of midwives, of herbalists, of truth-tellers, now overflowed. Not with power. With presence. The people no longer asked what was allowed. They asked what was right. And in that shift, the kingdom cracked. Not broken, transformed. In the hills, the outcast watched fires flicker in the valleys. He said nothing. But a girl beside him whispered, "It's working." He did not smile. But he did not stop her from hoping. Because it was working. Not in battles won. But in names remembered. In altars reborn. In hands joined not by law, but by love. In the city, the king's throne sat empty. Not because he fled, but because he feared to stand up. And no one forced him to. Because he was no longer the center. The people were. They filled the halls. They held council in the courtyards. They made decisions by listening, not shouting. It was not perfect. It was not fast. But it was real. And from real things, the future grows. At dusk, a boy knelt in a field where his father once died for a tax he could not pay. The boy planted a seed. No monument. No flag. Just a seed. And the whisper, enough. Across the sea, other kings watched. And they, too, began to tremble. Not because of armies. But because they recognized the sound. The sound that comes before all change. The sound of people choosing not to be silent anymore. In the distance, the mask, once hidden, is now worn openly. Not by one. By many. And the old gods? They do not shout. They do not punish. They simply return. Wherever they are remembered. And now, they are ended where it began. In the woods. At the edge of what men call kingdom, and what the wind calls memory. A crow passed overhead, not flying, but gliding, as if watching. Below, the earth was wet with mourning, branches dripping like open wounds, the sky a sheet of pewter. Not storm. Not calm. Something in between, like breath held at the edge of a decision. The outcast stood by a dying fire. Its embers hissed, whispering their last stories into the soil. He did not speak. But behind him, a procession gathered, slow, quiet, burdened not with weapons, but with names. Mothers. Midwives. Scribes. Rune-bearers. Children who had seen too much and grown old too soon. They carried no torches. Only silence. And in that silence, a power greater than swords. From the city below, smoke still rose, not from ruin, but from kitchens. Bells still rang, not for edicts, but for meetings. The old king had vanished. No one mourned. They only nodded, and moved on. Because mourning, now, was for those who had never been seen. And memory was no longer locked in books. It walked. It breathed. It returned. At the base of the ancient stone, the altar without a name, the outcast stopped. He placed a single item upon it. Not gold. Not bone. A piece of cloth. Torn from the mask. The final fragment. The mask that had once hidden the face of exile, of heresy, of rebellion, now lay bare. And the people did not look away. They watched. Together. A woman stepped forward, the same queen who had lit candles for the nameless. She no longer wore jewels. Only a thread of red around her wrist. A sigil older than marriage. Older than law. She spoke only one word. In a language banned by decree, but remembered by blood, home. It echoed through the clearing like thunder held in a child's hand. No one cheered. They breathed. As if they'd been drowning for generations and had only now broken the surface. And then came the wind. Not gentle. But right. It swept through the trees, lifting cloaks, stirring ash, unbraiding years of silence. It touched every face, kingless and crowned alike. It whispered not names, but truths. That power built on fear always falls. That memory is not buried, only waiting. That the gods we were told to forget never truly left. They had been in the soil. The songs. The stories carried by trembling hands across winters. In the lullabies hummed by dying lips. In the drawings scratched on cellar walls beneath churches. In the herbs smuggled under veils. In every girl taught to hide her knowing. Now, they rose. In firelight, in shadow, in rain. Not as ghosts. But as inheritance. From the valley, pilgrims arrived. Not to worship. To witness. They brought no offerings, only questions. And were met with answers in the form of stories. The kingdom was no longer a place. It was a remembering. The cathedral remained. But its doors were open, and its altars shared. Where once only men had spoken, now all voices echoed. And where once blood was shed for power, now soil was turned for healing. The first laws were rewritten, not in Latin, but in common tongue. Not in stone, but in song. One verse for justice. One for forgiveness. One for the ones who never got to speak. And the outcast? He did not rule. He walked. From village to village. Listening. Learning. Reminding. He wore no crown. Only scars. Each a map. Each a memory. Children gathered where he passed, drawn not to myth, but to truth. They did not ask for stories of war. They asked for the names of the lost. And he gave them. One by one. A litany. A resurrection. The nights grew quieter. Not from fear, from peace. Not the peace of silence, but of song. Of firelight shared. Of food without tax. Of dances not outlawed, even if danced barefoot on royal roads. And in time, the mask was placed in the old cathedral. Not as a threat. Not as a trophy. As memory. So that no one would forget what forgetting costs. So that no one would build walls around truth again. It hung behind glass, not locked, but open. For all to see. For all to remember. Because kingdoms do not fall in one day. They erode. When we stop asking why. When we stop listening to the wind. When we trade wonder for control. But they also rise. In kitchens. In whispers. In the moment someone says, no more. This was such a moment. Not an ending. But a breath. A return. Not to the past. But to something beneath it. A girl knelt where the fire had died, and with a single coal still warm, she drew a symbol in the dirt, the same thread from the banner. A river. It ran from her hand, through the clearing, down the slope, into the village, and into the hearts of those who had once been told to bow. It said nothing. And yet, everything had changed. The gods had returned. But so had we. And that was enough.